Hey everyone, it's Stephanie. Welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to share a finishing tutorial with you and also to talk a little bit about my free stitch along that just concluded called Onward Noble Steed. I posted a public apology on every social media platform that you can find me on regarding the final image of Onward Noble Steed being problematic because of the history that I did not know about regarding Black children and alligators. You can read my apology here on YouTube, Facebook, or Instagram. I want to say thank you to anyone who reached out to me via email or direct message on any of my platforms. Thank you for all the patience and understanding and encouragement regarding this blunder on my part. I'm not going to lie, I was heartbroken that this happened and that it happened via me. And I don't say that to garner anyone's sympathy or pity. It just felt really awful that I had, in trying to give in trying to spread more diversity via stitching, I instead did something that felt offensive to some people, and I, again, am sorry. However, I was so blown away not only by the personal messages of thanking me for revealing this part of history and creating a learning experience. I was so impressed by how many people took it upon themselves to not only read more history, but also to make their piece into a creative piece of art. And so this tutorial is going to be showing me finishing my piece as is. I did this tutorial before I realized that the crocodile had negative connotations, and so I hope it doesn't further offend anyone that I am showing my finishing tutorial. But I will echo the stitchers who also, were super quick about finishing the crocodile even before they knew it was a little problematic, in saying that I'm looking at my piece and saying it is an image of conquering and moving forward and wanting better things. Now, to move on from my sad ramble, I want to show you some really lovely finishes that showed up in the LINDY Stitchers Facebook group. You can find them down below. Here are just a few that I asked permission to share. There were so many. Thank you if you stitched this piece. You embraced this creative challenge, and I did right away put out another version that was a dragon or a dinosaur, and people went so... It was just a great community exercise in creativity and rising to a challenge. And so here are a few that I'd like to share with you. And after these pictures is the tutorial. Thank you again for being so kind, and thank you for stitching diversely. I appreciate all of you so much, and I love this community. And take a look at these amazing pieces. everyone, welcome to a Finish With Me video. Today I am going to fully finish my stitch along piece called Onward Noble Steed. A lot of you stitched this with me and it was so great to see your projects. This might be a useful video for any of you who decided to stitch the piece using the called for colors. Some of you claimed that you felt kind of boring for not mixing it up, but this is your advantage. I'm going to show you exactly how I finish mine, and you might want to finish yours in the same way. So right now, I do not have any access to my collection of quilting fabrics. Those are currently in a storage shed. We're in a time of transition right now, and I don't particularly want to take a trip to Joann's or Hobby Lobby. So I'm just using my stash of Lady Creates products. If you're not familiar with Lady Creates, she hand dyes lots of things that you can use to finish your pieces, including velveteen, wool, pom-pom trim, chenille, ribbon, lace, all sorts of goodies in all sorts of colors. So I've gone through my stash and pulled anything that looked interesting for this piece, and I'm going to make decisions as we go along. So the first decision that I need to make is what I want to put on the back of my pillow. Now, you can cross stitch in any way you want. You can finish it so that you have fabrics that you can see on the front that coordinate with the piece. I'm just going to go super simple with this one. So I'm going to choose a backing, and you're not going to be able to see it from the front, but I still want it to coordinate, obviously. So I've pulled these products that I think look good. So I have 3 velveteens and 1 wool. And bear in mind, I don't have every single product from Lady Creates. These are just stuff that I had in my stash. This is a velveteen called Lilacs, and you can see it matches her dress really well. One of the things that I love about finishing is that it's really fun to see how you can enhance what you've already done. Your finishing should make your piece even more interesting and make you even prouder of the art that you've created. And so it's really fun because you're taking your project to a whole new level. You're making it more visually appealing. And so depending on what you pull and what you use, your piece is going to look different than when you first finished it. Anyway, velveteen is a super easy fabric to finish with, and I love using it on the back of pin cushions because it adds another textural piece of interest. That was kind of the worst way to put it. It's texturally appealing to me, and if you're a person that is very tactile, I think you would love to use velveteen. You can iron it. It's no more difficult to use than a piece of cotton. So that's Lilacs, and you can see that that would just play off of her dress. Here's another color. You'll see I have a lot of things pulled that enhance the gaiter. This velveteen is called String Bean. Oh, string beans in the plural. So that would definitely match my gaiter. Here's a fun brown that I have used many times because it's just a great neutral brown that, it kind of matches everything. This is called Potato. That would be nice on the back. And this is a piece of wool called Whale's Tail. This is the same wool that is used on my Merry Manatee's pin drum. And I am a sucker for anything herringbone or houndstooth, and so I love this, and it would kind of just be a neutral on the back with a little more visual interest than just the velveteen. So, Alright, so a thought, and I really like the purple. I want to keep this piece bright and cheery, and we'll kind of just set the purple there, and I'm going to show you the different trims that I pulled. So These trims are going to go around the edge of my pillow. And you know, sometimes I choose a trim and then change my mind once I've actually sewn the pillow. But here are some options that would work well. I have a lot of different types pulled that could work. This is a rickrack called Bird's Nest, and it's just a variegated brown. When you finish with rickrack, you kind of just stick out half of it, and so that would be little brown loop-de-loops in the seam. And if I chose rickrack, I would need to go ahead and use it. Unlike chenille or ribbon or pom-poms, where you can just add them after your pillow is finished, you actually need to use the rickrack in the seam. So I would have to choose that right away. Another option that works the same way is lace, because you're sewing that also into the seam. This is a nice brown called Buster Brown's, a brown lace that would go around the edge. And here is one of my favorite products from Lady Creates, because it can pretty much go with everything. This one is called Dirty Face Lace, and it's definitely lighter than the Buster Browns. These would all be really cute, but I think I'm going to choose something a little more colorful and fun. So we'll put those aside. Let's talk about ribbon. I have a couple interesting ribbon options. This is called Heliotrope, and it kind of matches the lilac color. It's a little bit brighter. Another option, and this color was actually created for me. It was created for ex-girlfriend, and I love this color ribbon. This is Grubby Wog, and this would be more contrasting than the purple. But again, you're not going to see the lilacs from the front. So that would be a great alligator enhancing trim. Alright, so ribbon aside, let's talk about chenille. I do have a finishing with chenille trim video tutorial if you're not sure how to finish with chenille. Chenille and pom-poms, I think, are the most beginner friendly of all the trims you could add to the edge of your piece. Now look at this color. This is fun. This could be interesting. This matches her little leggings. This color of chenille is called Motherlode. Interesting. Here is a vintagey brown called Bird's Nest, and that would be a little more neutral of a trim. And lastly, a good gator color, and that is pretty matchy-matchy. This trim is called Mossy. Okay. You know, finishing for the indecisive, it can be fun, but it also can keep you up at night. Alright, so those are my chenille options. We will throw those in the pile. Next up, my favorite way, and in my opinion the easiest to use, would be pom-poms. And these also, as I already mentioned, are added after you sew your pillow. And you take them off the tape. You can take these right off the tape. I have a finishing with mini pom-pom trim tutorial on my channel as well. I will link that down below, but you rip these off the tape and you just whip stitch them on the edge. I have 3 different greens. Lady Creates rocks my green loving world. This one is called Lush Lawn, and you can see that as I lay these greens out, they do different things to the alligator. They make him look duller or brighter, depending on which you choose. This green is called Witchy. That one's a little bright, but still fun. And I think my favorite of the Lady Dot greens is Mossy. And that would be really fun. And you can see the mossy. In some of the palms, the tape, which you don't see anyway, dyes kind of a different color than the palms themselves. And so this is kind of like a DMC 166 green. I love it. Okay, those would be really fun. And I have some palms in the color Motherlode coming to me as well. And so those could also be interesting. All right, so now it's decision time. I don't know. I think I'm definitely going to put the lilac velveteen on the back. And if you're like me and you're indecisive and you like to procrastinate making actual decisions, then you just say, well, I'll use chenille or pom-poms and decide after I make my pillow. So that's what I'm going to do. I am going to go ahead and sew up my pillow and make my decision after the pillow's made. So that's going to rule out using rickrack, and it's also going to rule out using lace. And those I'm okay with ruling out for now. So let's talk about how to make a simple pillow. Next up is ironing. I'm not going to take you to my ironing table, but I will tell you how I iron my pieces. I heat my iron up as hot as it will go. I put a clean beach or bath towel down over my ironing board to give it some extra cushion. That's how you can get out some more stubborn wrinkles. I mist my piece on the back side with either some Best Press, or if I'm out of that, I use a little bit of water mist. You don't want droplets, but just a misting. And then I iron until there's no visible wrinkles. I will do the same thing for the velveteen because it can come kind of wrinkly. On the back side, I never iron the fuzzy side of the velveteen. Then I'm going to interface it. So after you've made sure there's no visible wrinkles, I will cut a piece of interfacing. This is the interfacing that I use. It was recommended to me by Vonna Pfeiffer, the Twisted Stitcher. It is Pellon P44F. You can buy this by the bolt on Joann.com, or you can buy a yard of it at your local crafting store. It's super cheap. It'll cost you a couple bucks. So you're going to follow the manufacturer's instructions. You basically, I'll just cut a piece that covers up my stitching a good ways, even though my pillow is probably going to end up this big. And you just want to melt the interfacing onto the back of your stitching, but you don't go too crazy or you will actually melt the very interfacing. It will come peeling off. So it's a fine balance. If you've never used interfacing before, you could definitely practice on a scrap piece of cotton or whatever of where that point is of it being perfectly fused onto your piecing but not starting to peel off and melt. And I definitely had to learn that lesson. Anyway, the reason you interface is because number one, it provides more stability to your fabric. It also protects your stitching from coming out if you... Wow, that's interesting. If you had any, for some reason, loose stitches or whatever, it'll capture your ends. And it also will keep whatever you use from stuffing from poking out your holes. I'm also going to interface the velveteen just to give it a little more stability. I'll cut, I have a big, it comes in fat eighths. I'll cut a piece that's, generous enough. I'm going to go do that and show you the results. Here's my interfaced ironed pieces. I just love the feeling of freshly ironed and interface stitching. It's just so much more stable and solid feeling after it's ironed and interfaced. Now here is what is the scariest part for everyone, including me, is cutting your stitching down. So how I usually decide where I want to cut it is I usually just play with it and fold it back. Means I'll have to iron it again, but that's okay. Just to get a visual idea of how big I want my margins. Now, when you're making a pillow, if this was a flat fold, we wouldn't have this discussion, but when you're making a pillow, you have to remember that it's going to have a blimp shape, which means your edges are going to have some bend toward them. You need to kind of give yourself a little more margin than you'll need. I do like it my pillows pretty tight. I don't want them, for example, to be, you know, this big with all this extra fabric. Props to you if you like really big pillows, but you don't want to cut it too close and make your seam, for example, right here, or the alligator's nose is going to take a downward turn, his feet are going to go down, and your design is just going to be warped around the edges of the pillow. So you have to give, I mean, I would definitely say 3/4 of an inch at the least. And remember that you're going to need 1/4 inch for your seam allowance. So I think I'm going to just cut an inch away, on an inch from the edge of my stitching, and that will give me 3/4 of an inch after I sew it, and that will be fine. That's a little bit bigger than I normally go, but it'll be okay. I'm gonna do some musing. Be right back. So one more factor that might affect your seam allowances is whether you like your pillows super duper stuffed or you like them a little bit on the looser side. The more stuffed you like them, obviously the more curvature you're going to have because they're fuller. I don't stuff my pillows as tightly as I see other people stuffed. I like, because of that tactile pleasure that I get from pin cushions, I like them a little loosey-goosey. If you like them a little loosey-goosey, you can go a bit tighter because they will lay flatter because they don't have as much stuffing. Anyway, I usually go with a 3/4 inch seam cutting allowance, and that gives me 1/2 inch of seam allowance. I'm just going to go ahead and go for that. You can watch my process and decide, hey, I'd like more, or hey, I stuffed my pillows more than that, so I need more, or I need less, whatever the case may be. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this piece, then I will show you how I cut the velveteen, because I cut it the lazy way. Okay, it just occurred to me that perhaps I should show you my cutting, because maybe people might need help with that. I cut, what side I cut first. Your first cut is obviously the most important, because if you get that wonky, then you're going to have a hard time with the rest of your cutting. How I choose which side to cut first is I like to find the side that has the most clues of where the squareness of the design is, if that makes any sense. And so I can see, I know where the line is on the bottom. So the very bottom of my pattern is the end of his tail, if you can see that. And I want to line my ruler up along the edge of that line. So here's my 3/4 of an inch, and I want to make sure that my lines are lining up with my stitching. And so let me get another visual tool. Here's my 3/4 inch. It's on the bottom of his tail. I can look with my eyes and look at these other lines and make sure that they're going even with my lines, the lines of my stitches. For example, I can see this line right here is lining up great with the edge of the stitching under her arm. And so I know that my ruler is straight. So after you make your first cut, the other cuts are easier because you can square up with your first cut. I can also look at the lines of my even weave and see that those are straight. And so I'm going to cut with some confidence and a little bit of heart palpitations. Here we go. Okay, now I can just use my rotary mat, which has seen many a project, as you can tell. So I can line up with my rotary mat now and go to his nose, which is the other edge. Line my ruler up with the bottom, his nose with the 3/4 line, and cut with less heart palpitations than the first cut. I can throw my linen scraps on the floor like a bum. Okay, so third cut's even easier because I can put this corner right in the corner of my rotary mat. The top little ponytail of her head is where my 3/4 line is going to go. Yep. Okay. Throw it on the floor. And this is where this is where you find out if your lines were straight. Corner, corner, edge of his tail. And you can see my lines are good. Line up everything and cut. This looks wonderful. I am very proud of this. Okay, let me show you the lazy way of cutting your backing. Now, really strange people, in my opinion, would measure this and figure out the measurements and then put those measurements onto here and try to figure it out. I'm not sure why you do that. Here's what I do. I just lay it on top. And I'm going to put right sides together just because the velveteen will kind of grip my stitching. So right sides together, and I'm just going to stick a couple pins in this to make sure it doesn't move, and I'm going to cut the edges off. Genius! Okay, like a real genius, I think I also stuck all my pins in storage. I don't know what I was thinking. I sleep deprived, bad organizing decisions. So I'm using, the only thing I could find was these bridle and lace pins. Anyway, so here's my sandwich. I'm putting right sides together, and I'm just going to stick a few pins in it so it doesn't move around. I am going to take this over to my sewing machine and sew around the edge, except for a little pocket on the bottom. And I will mark that with a couple pins. We're going to leave ourselves a little turning spot on the bottom of the pillow so that we can turn everything right side out. I'm going to make it right here. So I'm going to start here. I'm going to go around the pin cushion to here. When I get to the corners, I'm going to back up and reinforce the corners before I do the next side. Back up, reinforce the corners, go around. This has got a little wonky with my pinning. I will fix that first and come back and show you the result. 1/4 inch seam, very important. All right, here's where we're at after the sewing machine. You can see I reinforce my corners by back stitching across where they meet. I'm going to go ahead and trim right up to the edge of that stitching on my corners so I can poke them out. And you can also see I left this open so I can turn it. My opening is, I characteristically don't leave myself enough room to open. The problem with that is that you're going to seriously wrinkle and mangle your piece if you don't leave yourself a good opening. Mine is 2.5 inches. We'll see how that works out. So now I am going to turn it right side out and we'll see how we did. And I try to grab the velveteen, not the front, just to try to avoid wrinkling the front. And she looks good. Packed my favorite poker. I don't know what I was thinking. This is not my favorite poker. My favorite poker is actually a wooden meat skewer. But this'll do. This is a chopstick. Is that wooden, or it's actually a metal meat skewer, and like the kind you can make kebabs out of, because it has a nice like point to it. This chopstick doesn't have the nicest point to it. But whatever, we will make do. I'm just gently poking out the corners. Ooh, that's a nice corner. And making sure my seams are all nicely turned out. All right, you can see it needs ironed again. So that is what I will do, and then we'll talk about stuffing. All right, we're all freshly ironed and poked out, and I have my nice flap, which worked out well because it ended up not mangling the piece too much when I turned it. I like the 2.5 inches, and we'll be whip stitching that closed after this is stuffed. You can stuff your project with anything. Sawdust, you can stuff it with mountain mists, batting. I love the weight and the feel of crushed walnut shells. You can purchase crushed walnut shells that are specifically manufactured for stuffing needlework. Many stitchers have found this as a cheaper and just as good option. These are ground English walnut shells. It's actually lizard litter that people use in their aquariums for their lizards. You can buy this on Amazon. It's super cheap. This is a 5-quart bag. I can easily stuff 10 projects with this one 5-quart bag. It lasts a long time. I'm just now breaking into my second bag. But the neatest way to use this, I've found, is to pour this kind of messy, hard to handle bag into a bigger cup, and then I will stick my funnel into here and just kind of tamp the litter in until it's almost as stuffed as I would like it to be. So I'm going to do that now. All right, now I already mentioned that I have tricks for dealing with my indecision. So I'm not sure if I like the amount that I've stuffed here or not. But here's how you deal. Because if you want this even more stuffed, you're going to have to make this whole smaller anyway. So I'm going to start whip stitching up my seam. So I make it all nice. I have a sharp quilter's needle, so it's not my tapestry needle, it has a sharp tip, and I have a long length of all-purpose sewing thread with a knot that I made on the end. I'm going to bury the knot, and I'm going to start whip stitching this gap closed. So I'm just taking a little bit. There is a fancier stitch that you can do. I don't do it. You know why? This is good enough for me. I'm just taking a little bit of the front of the linen, a little bit of the velveteen, and I'm making small stitches because I have tiny crushed walnut shells in there and I don't want them to fall out. I've never had them fall out, but I imagine it happens sometimes. Okay, so I've stitched it about 3/4 of the way full. My funnel will technically still fit in there. And I'm just gonna judge whether I wanna let some walnut shells free, or I like it, or I want more. You can see she is kind of bending over the top of the pillow. I honestly think this is okay. And I'm sorry for the shaking that my camera is doing. I'm thinking I'm gonna leave this. There's still some give. She's a little bendy over the top, but I think I'm using some of the space right here to pinch it close. I think that I'll have a little bit enough give to kind of flatten her out. So I'm gonna finish whipping this up. Okay, so I've sewn all along the edge and I've met up with the regular stitching, and just to knot off, I'm going to make another stitch, and before it closes, you just go back into this loop and make a knot. I do that 3 times or 2 times. And then bury the thread in the pillow. Now you can see my seam is visible. You can tell where I finished it. Now the good thing about putting a trim on the edge, to bury it, I just stick it back in there, then find my needle. Voila. You can see where I turned it. Now, that is the lovely thing about doing trim, is that you'll hide that. It's not the neatest thing, and I wasn't trying to be the neatest thing because I know I'm going to cover it up. So let's talk about trim. I started off thinking the heliotrope ribbon would look great. It does match wonderfully with the piece. However, it just looked too girly frou-frou to me. And so I nixed it, picked it out. My next try was the Motherlode chenille. If you're a yellow person, I think this is a great option. I am not a huge yellow person, and it just felt like too much yellow to me. So I picked it out. The one I ended up going with is Sandy Gold, and I really wish I would have been patient and waited until my Motherlode palms arrived in the mail. You can see these colors are pretty similar. The Motherlode is more saturated, and it actually almost perfectly matches the yellow charted in her leggings, and so I think this is the A+. I went with the A-, and it still turned out wonderfully, and I love it. I did the Sandy Gold, and I will show you what she looks like. Excuse my dirty finishing desk. Here's Onward Noble Steed. And I love how the colors turned out. I just think it looks great. I didn't show you how to put pom-pom trim on because I already have a tutorial showing you how to do that, and I will link it down below. So here's the seam where I turned it, and you can't even see it, which is great. You can't see my join either. I think she's wonderful and precious. If you stitched this with me, I just want to say thank you. I hope that you're signed up for my newsletter because there's more freebies coming your way in the future, and that's where I like to put them. If you'd like to sign up, the link is down below. And you can catch me on Instagram and Facebook as Lindy Stitches. Thank you so much for sharing your finishes with me. I really loved seeing all of them. And I thank you for stitching diversely. Catch you later, friends. Bye.